Another fairly quiet week coming up in week 3 in the Big Ten. What's going on YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we're going to preview each game and I'll give you my prediction. Let's jump right into it. So we get Virginia, Maryland, a Friday night game, 7 o'clock Eastern time. This game will be on FS1. Maryland favored by 14.5 points. Maryland has looked pretty good so far. Got off to a slow start last week, but overall the offense has been playing pretty well. Virginia just lost to James Madison. Of course, they got blown out by Tennessee. And so Virginia, again, I've said this before, I think they might be the worst Power 5 team. Maryland's offense should be enough to keep this game from being all that close. I don't think it's a blowout, but I'm going to say they win it 38-24. Next, we got Penn State, Illinois, a Big Ten Conference game. How about that? Noon Eastern time on Fox, the big noon game. Penn State favored by 14.5 points in this one. Illinois' defense has not been as good as I thought it would be so far this season, and the offense, I think, is still kind of trying to get things figured out. Penn State's been very impressive so far, especially with that win over West Virginia. I don't see them having too much trouble. It is on the road. Maybe they get off to a bit of a slow start, but I think at the end of the day, they pull away, win it 34-17. Next up, we've got Louisville versus Indiana. This game will be in Indianapolis. Big Ten Network at 12 o'clock Eastern time. Louisville's favored by 10 points. I think Indiana's a little better than people are giving them credit for. They looked pretty solid last week. It wasn't a great opponent, but still. Louisville has that win over Georgia Tech where they were impressive coming from behind. So I do think Louisville is the better team, but I think Indiana's going to put up a fight in this one. It won't be enough. Louisville will win it 31-20. All right, next up, we've got Georgia Southern versus Wisconsin. Georgia Southern's 2-0, and they've actually looked pretty impressive, especially on the offensive side in those first two games. This game's on the Big Ten Network. Wisconsin favored by 19.5 points. That's a big number. Wisconsin is still trying to get things figured out. I've said that before. This team is going to be a lot better in November than they are in September. Went on the road last week, lost to Washington State. And again, I'm still trying to kind of figure things out with all the new pieces coming together there at Wisconsin. So I think they win, but I don't expect it to be a blowout. In fact, I think it's going to be a one-score game. 31-24 is my prediction. Wisconsin in a close one. Next up, we got Northwestern versus Duke, 3:30 Eastern time on the ACC Network. Duke's favored by 18.5 points in this game. Blue Devils have shown they've got a really good defense this year. You wonder about the offense. How many points will they put up against Northwestern? Northwestern has seemed to have a pretty good defense. Remember, they did get that win last week when they were actually underdogs. I think Northwestern is really going to struggle to score in this game. Their defense will keep it close for a little bit, but not long. I think Duke takes care of this one. 31-10 the final score. Blue Devils get the win. Next up, we've got Minnesota, North Carolina, 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN. North Carolina is favored by 7.5 points in this one. Should be a really good game. Minnesota's defense has played really, really well so far. In fact, they've surprised me how well they've played on that side. But the offense, Callie McManus has not really gotten it going in the passing game despite having a lot of weapons at receiver around him. Is this the game they get the offense clicking? I think their defense will be enough to keep it close. North Carolina, they almost lost to App State last week, but they looked really good against South Carolina. So I don't know which team is going to show up this week. They're playing at home, though. If this was at Minnesota, I'd probably take the Gophers, but I'm going with North Carolina at home to win a close game, 24-19. I think Minnesota's defense keeps them in this game, but at the end of the day, it's not enough. North Carolina in a close one, 24-19. Next up, we've got Virginia Tech versus Rutgers, 3:30 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. Rutgers favored by 7 points in this game. Rutgers has looked pretty good, really, through the first couple of games. Virginia Tech lost a close one to Purdue last week, but Virginia Tech, they also look improved from where they were last year based off of what we've seen so far. So this is a tough one for me. I really think this is a game that comes down to the wire, really one that I could see going either way. I'm going to say it's a low-scoring game. Rutgers gets it done, but close. 23-20 the final score in this one. Next, we've got Western Michigan versus Iowa. This game's at 3:30 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. Iowa favored by 28.5 points. Hawkeyes defense, we know it's going to show up. The offense has maybe been a little better this year than last year, but still not super explosive. That 28.5 number is just huge. I don't think that this game, I don't think Iowa wins by more than 28. but I do think they win comfortably. I'm going to say 34-10, the final score here against a Western Michigan team that they should have no trouble with. Next, we've got Western Kentucky versus Ohio State. Now, this game's at 4 o'clock Eastern Time on Fox. Ohio State's favored by 27.5 points. Western Kentucky has looked really good so far this season. Their offense is always really tough to stop. Ohio State's offense is still, they're kind of trying to figure things out themselves, but their defense has played really well. I do think Western Kentucky's offense will challenge them a little bit. I think this game will be a lot closer than you might expect. I don't think it's a game where Western Kentucky actually has a chance to win, but I think they keep it somewhat close, somewhat competitive for a while, but Ohio State will pull away. Maybe they get that offense going in the second half. 38-17, the final in this one. Next up, we've got Washington and Michigan State, 5 o'clock Eastern Time on Peacock. It still really gets on my nerves they put this game on Peacock, because I like to flip back and forth on the games, and it's hard to load up a whole separate app. But anyways, different story there. Washington favored by 16.5 points. The offense we know has looked great so far. Michigan State's actually looked pretty good through 2 games. Haven't played great competition. But all the off-the-field distractions on Mel Tucker, I think that could potentially cost Michigan State. Or perhaps these players they rally together. They just want to get out there and play football, and they go out and they shock the world and they upset Washington. I think it's probably going to be the former. I think Washington will win this one 37-24. Michigan State will put up a fight, I think, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I just think that Washington offense is too much. The next, Northern Illinois versus Nebraska. 7 o'clock Eastern Time, Nebraska favored by 10.5. This game's on FS1. Northern Illinois got a win over Boston College in Week 1, then they lost to an FCS team last week. That makes absolutely no sense. Nebraska had better hope this is not a one-score game, or you just know they're going to find a way to lose it. So for my prediction, I'm going to say they win it by 9. It's not quite a one-score game, because if I went with 8 or 7, I don't think I could pick Nebraska, because they can't seem to win those games. And this team has turnover problems with Jeff Sims. If he turns it over, they could potentially lose, but I think they'll play well enough to get this win, 27-18. And then we go to Bowling Green at Michigan, 7:30 Eastern Time on the Big Ten Network. I think it'll be very similar to what we've seen the last couple of games for Michigan. They win. It's not going to be 56-0, but they'll win fairly easily, 35-10. I still think they're being pretty conservative with their offense. And then we have Syracuse and Purdue, 7:30 Eastern Time on NBC. Syracuse favored by 2.5 points. Purdue, they got a big win last week. That was a really big win for them over Virginia Tech. They're playing pretty well. I mean, they lost a close one to Fresno State. Syracuse has rolled through 2 games, but they haven't played the best competition. And so if I'm going by what I've seen this year, I probably would pick Syracuse just because they've looked good through 2 games. But I've made that mistake with predictions already. I'm going with all of my offseason research, and that tells me that I just don't think Syracuse is going to be that great this year. Purdue has already played 2 tough opponents. I think that'll help prepare them for a close win. 28-27, going with the Boilermakers to pull off a very slight upset. So those are the games and the predictions for Week 3. Give me your predictions in the Big Ten down in the comments below.